Hi everybody around the world, thanks for joining me. My name's Nothing Fancy and I'm doing another gun review. This is kind of a historical gun review, i.e. you're not going to go down to your local gun shop and find this gun. This is an older H&K P7 9mm semi-automatic pistol, and it has a history. And by the history, this is a P7 PSP, and that stands for Police Service Pistol. And it dates way back probably to the early 80s, and this pistol actually served in the West German police force, and that's what PSP stands for. Another designation would be just the P7. It's not a P7 M8, M standing for magazine 8 rounds. It's actually just a PSP version. Sorry for the noise. You might hear talking, rock and roll in the background. Again, this is at the location of my retailer who's allowing me to do these reviews, as I often do. And it's Van Wagenen's Provo, Utah, where I sometimes go for my work purposes. Back to the gun, though. The magazine release on this P7 PSP is actually right here at the butt of the gun. And that was the preferred location for many years for all European pistols. And this P7 was no different. By the way, let's pull that out and do our safety check like we always do. Yep, empty gun. Now, I say it's a historical gun, not just for the mere fact that this particular gun served in the West German police force. It was sold as surplus and imported later through H&K. As you can see, that's when they stamped this on here. H&K, Heckler and Koch Industries, Trussville, Alabama. That's when they stamped it. But it's also historical from the standpoint that the P7 was one of the very first really reliable 9mm pistols that could basically function with all types of ammunition. I'll make a video that references the development of the reliable semi-automatic pistol, but this is one of them, the H&K P7. It came in an M8 version, 8 rounds, and also an M13 version, 13 rounds. And it was, and actually still is, a very outstanding 9mm pistol. Now, there are some good things and some bad things about the H&K P7, which I'm just going to go ahead and tell you as I go along here. And if we were to compare this gun against my standard, the Glock 17, it's pretty much going to lose out on almost every front. Almost every front. And for instance, weight. The weight of the P7 is substantial. I don't have my scale with me today, but and I forget what the specs are, but this is definitely more than 25 ounces, probably along the order of 30, maybe even a little bit more ounces. So it's definitely heavier. Even though it does have a very low profile, I believe it's a steel frame gun with a steel slide, and you're just going to pay for that in terms of weight. Now, in terms of reliability, the P7 had a very good reputation, and that's shown just by the mere fact that it was adopted by several law enforcement agencies, the West German police, of course, being one of them. They used it for a number of years, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know of all the European agencies that did use it. Suffice it to say, there were a lot. There were some U.S. Highway Patrol units that actually used it, and actually they still might use it. So it's an extremely reliable, very high quality semi-auto pistol. One of the first, and it actually broke ground in its use of the gas system, because this is not a recoil or Browning system. It is a gas operated 9mm pistol. Not going to go into the specifics of that, but some people say that it makes it softer shooting. I have shot this gun. I've probably put about, not this particular one, but I have shot P7s before. My buddy had one, and I probably put about 200 rounds through it. What I noted is that it would get very hot, that while you were shooting it, this portion here, the slide, would get just really warm, and that was an outgrowth or a consequence of the gas system. I think it kind of transfers heat to the entire gun, and actually it got so hot that we basically had to put it down and let it cool off. Now, that being said, it does have some very nice features to it, one of them being the very excellent in-hand profile of the P7. Notice how low the bore axis is to our hand. Other designs have copied this since, but the H&K P7 broke this ground where they really tried to sit, and this is an outgrowth or a benefit of that gas system, is they were able to sink that bore axis very close to the web of your hand, and that makes the P7 very quick with follow-up shots. That as we pop rounds off, it'll jump, but not that much. If we raise that bore axis up above our hand, what it's going to do is increase that moment arm. So every time we subject ourselves to recoil, the barrel is going to flip all that more. The longer, or the more we can lower it to the web of our hand, the more in line that gun's going to be, the more controllable it is. And the P7 is just that. Also, it's extremely accurate. The P7 was one of the very first guns, again, going back to its historical groundbreaking design, to use polygonal rifling. That's a very accurate rifling that would seal the gas behind the bullet and also impart a very nice spin to it that made it just darn accurate. The sights were groundbreaking because this is one of the very first semi-auto pistols that came out with a 3-dot pattern combat sights, which are very quick to pick up, very effective, and they weren't the first, they were just one of the first. And ever since, just about every combat gun on the market does the same type of sights. This is the squeeze cocker mechanism, and you have to cock the gun like so by squeezing it. And once that's done, you can fire it. Now, I have mixed feelings about it. I don't like grip safeties, and I don't like squeeze cocker mechanisms. I think it's overly complex, and it's just kind of jacked up, especially compared to the simplicity and the reliability of a Glock, which is just dispenses with all that nonsense. You don't have to do it. However, that being said, it does work. It's very proven, and it's very effective. So, squeeze cocker, it is a design, actually, to be honest, it just did not catch on. If it did catch on, we'd have designs here in 2008, when I'm making this video, that would have this. And we don't. So that's a great way, by the way, to just tell if a design is worthwhile. Do other manufacturers copy it? Let's talk like the sights. Well, everybody does those sights. It's because they work. They always work. So the squeeze cocking mechanism, it works fine, but it's just overly complex. Now, even though the gun's heavy, it is very accurate, very reliable. So you might ask yourself, why don't we see more P7s in the holsters of police officers around the country, and or in the hands of civilians, responsible civilians? And the reason is, what really sunk the P7 wasn't the design, it wasn't the squeeze cocker, it wasn't the weight. All those were just fine, and it was still a very advanced design of the day. What sunk the P7 was cost. It's a very expensive pistol. It always has been. Even in the 80s, it was around $900, maybe even $1,000 to obtain a P7 M13, and they remain expensive. Now here we have a gun that dates back to the early 80s with a heel catch magazine release, and here at Van Wagenen's it's being sold for around $650. So it retains its value. That's because of its historical importance. It's still a very good and reliable design. They're just expensive. But when you had other guns roll into the market, especially the Ruger P89, the Glocks, and some of the Sigs that were even cheaper than the P7, and it just sunk the P7 design. So it just couldn't compete in terms of cost. Not in terms of reliability, or actually just cost. Here's the magazine, and this might be a disadvantage of the design. It only holds 8 rounds. Now granted, the M13 version held 13 rounds, which was more, but still the Glock, when it came out holding 17 rounds, even the M13 version of the H&K could not compete. So that, again, is a disadvantage of the design. It just doesn't hold that many rounds. Nice stippling on the back strap here. A lot of manufacturers have copied that. However, that is a steel, exposed steel here, and so if you're in very cold conditions, guess what? It's going to be transferred right to your hand unless you're wearing gloves. So there's a lot to like about the P7, no doubt, and it still is a very advanced design. Very reliable. I can't really speak to the takedown of it. I haven't done it, nor have I researched it, so I'm just going to let that be. But if you ever run across one, you want a historical gun that still can run, at least accuracy-wise and reliability-wise, with the best of them, you might want to look into the P7. It is one of the very first groundbreaking semi-auto pistols designs that was widely adopted by law enforcement agencies, that basically turned around the way we think of semi-automatic pistols. And before, most law enforcement agencies would just use revolvers. Heckler and Koch P7. Thank you very much, Van Wagenen's, for hosting this review. This is a cool gun. It's still heavy, though. Too heavy for me. I'll take my Glock. Nothing fancy. Peace out.